Evidence for evolution. The first and probably the most important thing that I want to emphasize right now is that evolution is a scientific theory. Emphasis there on the theory part, meaning that it is currently a hypothesis that has been tested and it is supported with considerable evidence, but that does not make it scientific law by any means. This is one of the state standards, which means I have to teach it. I teach it out of the book, chapter 3. You can go look it up. You can go read about it. It's in chapter 3. Evolution is a scientific theory. So I want you to always have that in your mind as we talk about some of these things. So our definition of scientific theory is a hypothesis that has been tested and supported repeatedly by considerable evidence. And even this definition is a little bit questionable because it has the words repeatedly in here. Like, how many times is repeatedly? Is that like twice or 5 times or like 1,000 times? And then considerable evidence. We are going to examine the evidence that does support evolution, but who is it that gets to decide what a considerable amount of evidence is? So anyway, just some things to keep in mind as we discuss evolution. The first thing is the fossil record. We have information of transitional species. And transitional species are fossils, so that means they are preserved as rock. Fossil species that represents an intermediate stage in the evolution of one species to the next. And as an example of a transitional species, we are going to say that the first species, the first organism, started out as some sort of fish-like thing that I have drawn here. And then it is predicted that we eventually got our lovely frogs. So what would the transitional species between a fish and a frog look like? This is where I want you to draw something that you think would come in between the fish and the frog. So your job is to fill in some sort of intermediate stage between those two things. So again, you can, pause this video right here, draw in your transitional species, and then push play again. Number 2, we have homologous structures. Homologous structures are a body part that shares a common evolutionary origin. With body parts in other organisms, but they may have a different function. For example, we have a very rough sketch of the human arm. The upper arm bone is the humerus. Your forearm is composed of two bones, the radius and the ulna. Your fingers are composed of the carpals, and then the metacarpals are the ones at the very end of your fingers. This same structure is mirrored in the bat. So the humerus would be there. The radius and the ulna are these two bones. The bats have carpals and metacarpals. One of the differences is that they have a different function. The bat can fly with its arms, because they're not arms, they're wings. Humans, not so much. Another example is the horse. So I'm trying hard to, this is like the head of the horse. So neck. This time with the horse, it's a little easier to start at the bottom. So the metacarpals are actually in the hoof. There's bony structures in there. What you think of the ankle of the horse would actually be like its wrist. What you think the knee of the horse is its wrist. And so that means these are are the carpals. These are the metacarpals. This is the radius and ulna. And this is the humerus. The front legs of the horse is what we're examining here. The shoulder is actually clear up inside. You can't easily identify it. What you think of as the knee of the horse, probably you would think that would be the knee. That's actually would be equivalent to our wrist. So everything is kind of shifted upwards in the horse. But anyway, the bone structure is very, very similar to the bat wing and the human arm. So again, this is evidence of homologous structures in different organisms. It indicates that we have a common evolutionary origin, but today these serve different purposes. Number 3 is vestigial structures. Vestigial structures is a body part that no longer serves a function. And there are several different vestigial structures on many different organisms. There's a couple on the human that you will probably be able to identify. One of them does not work very well on my stick figure right here. But one of them is the appendix. I'm sure you know someone who has had their appendix removed. Again, an organ that we are not exactly sure why we have one today. However, that doesn't mean that in the past, maybe it did serve a purpose. Another example, which is you'll kind of hear more about when you do your homework, is wisdom teeth. Yeah, those don't really look like wisdom teeth, but they are. Wisdom teeth, why do we have them? What purpose do they serve? Most people get them removed because they don't have room in their mouth, or they're causing pain or things like that. So, why do they even exist? There's more vestigial structures in the human body. There's also more in other organisms. For example, a whale has a pelvic bone. Don't really know what a pelvic bone looks like in a whale. The pelvic bone on us, the purpose of our pelvic bone is to have our legs be jointed so we're able to walk. Whales don't really have legs, nor do they walk. So why do they have that pelvic bone? Another example is on our emu. Emus have wings, but yet they do not fly, like, at all. So why does the emu have wings? Well, these are all structures that are thought to have once served a purpose, but now that purpose no longer exists. Vestigial structures. Next, we have embryology. Embryology, an embryo is the very, very teeny tiny organism that exists way early in the stages of life. We know that all organisms have very similar machinery, cellular machinery, that is, within our cells, and they all get their directions from DNA. So our very most basic activities in all organisms are carried out in the same way. Things like proteins are built from amino acids. That is true. Built from amino acids. That's true in all species. Sugar being broken down into ATP, also known as cellular respiration, is true in many, many, many species. And the third thing, all of our instructions are found in the very same molecules, which is DNA. So this is true for a variety of species. I don't know why I chose these three. Our chicken, our snake, and a pig, for example, are three very, very different organisms, but yet as teeny tiny embryos, you would have a very difficult time distinguishing them from each other. Their embryos, the very first stages of development, look a lot alike. So we have different body forms. Think chicken, snake, pig, right? 4 legs, 2 legs with wings, snakes, no legs. We have a beak, we have a curly tail, all of those things. Very different body forms can come from a single type of embryo. We get the different variations. They all look very different. They all function very different. Because we have different timing in our gene expression throughout the growth. And gene expression was that thing that we talked about several chapters ago, where we know that some genes are turned on and off at different times in your life. And so that's what creates differences in organisms. All right, we have family trees next. If we look at the DNA that is present in a wide variety of organisms, I have animals drawn here, but we can examine plants, we can examine bacteria, any sort of organisms. And we can see that 2 organisms that we think look similar, they function similar, like our mouse here and the rat. It shows us, if we look at their DNA, that similar animals have a lot of similar DNA. Okay, maybe this is not too surprising. It's not too crazy to think that the mouse and the rat are closely related. Similar animals, very similar DNA, or more similarities in their DNA. If we compared a mouse with a fish, no, we don't get those similarities in their DNA. So the more different those animals are, the more differences we see in their DNA. The more different, the less similar their DNA. So if we look at a rat and a fish, they're not going to have very much overlap. If we looked at, this is my finch, if we compared our finch and the chicken up here, wherever my chicken was, we would probably find a lot more similarities. If we compared the finch to the chicken, rather than the finch to the elephant. They probably would not have as many similarities in their DNA. All right, so We gather all of this evidence together. We gather our DNA-based family trees. We look at fossils and transitional species. We look at homologous structures. We look at embryos. And they are indirect evidence that supports evolution. Meaning, the indirect here means that it's not seen with our own two eyes. It's past, it's history. Indirect evidence that supports evolution. So my big question is, it's actually down here, can we see evolution? Can we today, right now, witness evolution happening? And I have 2 videos that are linked in this assignment in Schoology. One is called Evolution in a Big City. The other is called Evolution of Bacteria on a Mega Plate. So you need to watch those videos and then write 3 pieces of evidence from that video showing evolution. And then watch the evolution of bacteria on a mega plate and write 2 pieces of evidence from that video. So you are doing this on your own. Watch the videos. They are not very long, and fill in your pieces of evidence there and there. And from that, you then need to answer this question. Can you see evolution? Yes or no? When you got all that done, turn it in to Schoology. You know the drill. Dropbox. Submit. So, that is it.